Well, there we go, Ben. We're back again. Good morning, good afternoon, even Ben. How are you this
Good
afternoon?
afternoon. Very well, thank you, Richard. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. And this whole session is going to be focused on Northern Ireland. So, I mean, if you're not in Northern Ireland, please stay tuned because it is also very relevant to stuff that's going on in the UK because we don't class Northern Ireland as any different to Finchley or Aberdeen. We just class Northern Ireland as a fully integral part of the United Kingdom. And I think you're fully on board with that, Ben.
100%. I would urge anyone who cares about Great Britain as distinct from Northern Ireland to continue to listen because what impacts Northern Ireland has a direct bearing on what happens in Great Britain.
Exactly, exactly. Well, we're gonna dive straight in because we've got a lot of questions to ask. We've got some questions in the comments as well. So everybody that's watched my channel knows exactly who you are, Ben. So you don't need any more introductions. I think the first question is a very fundamental one. What does Advance UK have to offer voters in Northern Ireland that's different from all the other parties that are organising over here?
Well, I don't think that there is a single political party that stands for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And, people might be forgiven for thinking, surely that can't be right. But if you were to examine the field, as it were, there isn't one single party. Yes, the Conservatives are called, the actual name is the Conservative and Unionist Party, but it's them that put the Irish Sea border in place. The Labour Party backs SDLP in Northern Ireland, which is effectively a soft nationalist party. Reform's leader, Nigel Farage, is on the record saying he sees a united Ireland as inevitable, that he's perfectly happy to share a stage with Mary Lou MacDonald, and Leo Varadkar's a nice guy to have a beer with. These are things that I think are antithetical to a unionist. So I don't see any political party really standing up for you, Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. Now, of course, in Northern Irish politics, there are unionist parties, but they operate solely in Northern Ireland. So it's very challenging for them to be able to really give effect to the union because the union is Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And if you're only operating in Northern Ireland, I'm afraid you're slightly defeated. And the DUP has made no efforts to come to the mainland. That would have been the party that naturally could have done so. It had various alliances with the Conservative Party, etc. But it's made no attempt for a pan UK political to be a pan UK political force. And then, of course, the other parties, the TUV and PUP, are very small, and I think it would be deeply difficult for them to do it. So we will be the only pan UK political party, and we are coming to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about that, it's interesting what you're saying about the DUP because I always thought with the DUP and maybe the TUV and the UUP, they could have organised in Scotland because obviously Scotland is a natural unionist, heartland. There's some very strong unionist areas of Scotland that could have done a lot more to oppose, the Scottish nationalists. But you gave me some very interesting information about a member of the Alba Party. Do you just want to tell the viewers about what Reform have been doing with the
Yeah.
Alba Party?
Well, if anyone is labouring under the illusion that reform will stand strong for the union, I mean, rumours first broke a few months ago when they were trying to recruit former members of the SNP, and so effectively nationalists. But then this week, a lady called Regan, I can't remember her first name, who's a Scottish MSP for the Alba Party. I think she may even be deputy leader of Alba Party. You'll have to fact check me on it. Came out, made a statement saying that Reform had tried to recruit her, and she declined their advances. Now, if Reform is trying to recruit members of Alex Salmond's party, I know Alex Salmond has passed, but that is as Scottish nationalist as you get. Stands completely in opposition to the union, not just the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but the union of 1707 between Scotland and England. And so, where is reform on the union? And I did tweet about it, and I said, "Heads up, TUV, Jim Allister, and Kate Hoey. This is where reform is." You know.
I mean, well, what's next? I mean, is Nigel going to be talking to Michelle O'Neill about an alliance with Sinn Féin? Maybe, who knows?
Well, quite. Well, quite. Where does this go?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that brings us quite nicely onto the next question, Ben. I've got quite a lot of blowback from some unionists and friends of mine who are very worried about Advance coming in and fragmenting an already fragmented unionist vote, particularly in terms of the TUV seems to be doing quite well. And they're concerned that if we start organising, we're going to, shoe in more Republican and nationalist politicians into the system. What's your answer to that about vote splitting? Not just in Northern Ireland, but also in GB as well with reform and what's going on with reform.
Yeah.
Two questions.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of ways to answer that question. Perhaps I can start by asking a question in return, which sort of answers the question, which is Advance hasn't so far contested any elections. It therefore hasn't split any votes, and yet we find a union disintegrating. So any impact Advance makes can't be much worse than what's gone before. And the only hope that unionists can have is that reform, which seems to be the new political force on the block, would somehow restore the union. But we've just determined in the few minutes before this question that reform is not the answer for the union. Reform clearly is not a unionist party. And therefore, my response is, well, there's not a single unionist party to date, so-called unionist party to date, that has been able to save the union, assure its security. Whatever we do can't be that damaging. Number one, that's the first thing. The second thing, it can only be for the betterment. It wasn't us that put the blooming IFC border in place. It was the political forces that existed before Advance that put that border in place. And but I think perhaps the more the more sort of comprehensive answer is that the election isn't until 2029. It's a way off at the moment. The key is for Advance to spread its wings, explain its political philosophy to the people, win the people's hearts and minds to the best extent that it can, and then examine the electoral mathematics when it gets to 2028, 2029, and ensure, as responsible patriots that we are, that we do what's right for the country at that point in time, depending on how everything looks. And I can assure everyone that whilst we are not in business to be a pressure group, we are here to form an advanced UK government. We will nevertheless not do anything that is irresponsible and against the interests of the country. We will never do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and obviously that I suppose that feeds into the GB question as well as the Northern Ireland one. It answers both at the same time. So, what is going to happen if Advance get a lot of support and a lot of good polling? Well, it could be, and this is just me speaking hypothetically, that actually we'll be saying to Reform, well, you guys better stand down or you're going to split the vote. I mean, that would be the dream ticket, wouldn't it?
I mean, this whole notion about splitting the vote is a slightly flawed debate, because splitting the vote, it's the presumption behind splitting the vote. There are two presumptions behind splitting the vote. The first is that there is a political force that should be afforded government. It has an entitlement to it. And the whole point about democracy is that no one's entitled to have a position. It's for the British people to decide. So the splitting of the vote is a kind of convenient but intellectually flawed argument that someone like Reform or the Tories might make to try and preserve their position. But they are not entitled to assume that they should get the vote. It's a really bad approach to politics. The second thing is, it also presumes, the presumption behind it is that somehow what Reform offers, what the Tories might offer, what Advance offers, is broadly the same thing. It isn't. We're very, very different. And as I've just mentioned, actually, it was under the Tories' watch, under the Labour Party's watch, that the union has suffered so greatly. So a new political force must be given an opportunity. If it's unionism about which people are concerned, and they should be fundamentally concerned about it, because that is the very definition of our country. If you're not concerned about the union, then you've actually forgotten what it means to be British. So you must be concerned about the union, and there is not a political party on the landscape, including Reform, that is unionist. There isn't. Are you with me? So this whole presumption of splitting the vote is a slightly flawed one.
Exactly, and I think one of the things that Advance would do and you've alluded to this, that no other party could do, if you had Advance MPs delivered to Parliament, to deliver is probably not the right word, but maybe it is the right word, delivered to Parliament after the next election, then they're going to have a far bigger voice than the DUP, TUV, or any other politician that's coming from Northern Ireland. If you form the next government, then they're going to be in a position where they can knock the Prime
Yeah.
Minister's door and say, this needs sorted out, and they're going to have an open ear. Now, obviously, that brings up there's a question I was going to ask before that, but it brings us quite nicely onto the one about the cross community vote. I believe that there are a lot of people in Northern Ireland, specifically from working class Catholic areas, who are as concerned about the problems of mass migration, community cohesion, seeing their culture and their beliefs eroded by this woke internationalist blob. And I don't know how we do it, because obviously when you're a strong unionist party, it's difficult. But have you thought about how we can actually reach out to people from the Roman Catholic community, because there still are two communities in Northern Ireland, reach out to the Roman Catholic community and energize them to actually join Advance and support Advance, because we are such a strong unionist party. But what I'm thinking is we're not a sectarian party.
No, we're
Does that
not
make sense?
sectarian. I
Yeah.
mean, we do believe in the Christian roots and constitutional
As do Catholic, as do
Christian.
Roman
Yeah.
Catholics. Yeah.
And but can I just make I just want to address, because it partly answers this question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the DUP can't get as much, wouldn't be able to get as much traction in Parliament as an advanced UK MP because we are pan UK. And so anyone in Northern Ireland, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, that wishes to have a genuine voice in the United Kingdom at Westminster needs to back a pan UK party. There's no
Yeah.
point backing the DUP, which by definition can never get more than a handful of MPs and can never be a political force on the national landscape. It's actually the way politics has structured itself across the UK is to have turned its back on Northern Ireland. The
Yes.
DUP's existence and being the representatives of the unionist, so-called, they claim to be unionist party, though I have my doubts about some of the members of the DUP, if you don't mind me saying so. Um,
We all do.
you
Yeah.
know, they're stuck in a backwater. They're never gonna be able to do what's necessary for Northern Ireland because they're not pan UK. Advanced UK is pan UK, so it can do what's necessary for the best for Northern Ireland, and that applies equally to Catholics as it does to Protestants. And here's the really trump card. Here's the trump card. An advanced UK government will ditch the ECHR across all of the United Kingdom. It'll ditch the EU's human rights laws, which now apply to the Northern Ireland through the Northern Ireland Protocol Windsor Framework, which some people may not even be aware of. But actually, EU human rights law, which is different to ECHR, applies to Northern Ireland. That will go. That means we will be able to be so much more effective with illegal migrants in the United Kingdom than the Republic will be in its own territory, because the Republic will be subject to the ECHR and EU laws completely. So if you care about the rapid change in our demography, if you're worried about the state of the country as a result of this massive change that's taking place both through mass legal migration as well as illegal migration, the side of the border to be on would be north of the Republic in Northern Ireland, where we will be actually able to preserve the United Kingdom. Does that make
Yes,
sense? Yeah.
absolutely. Now, what the panickers and the commentariat will say whenever, if you say that on the BBC or on UTV, they'll say straight away, "Well, Ben, to do that, you've got to renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement." What's your stance on that?
Well, the EU didn't renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement when they imposed the Northern Ireland Protocol, which varied the Good Friday Agreement in a number of different ways, including on the human rights point that I've just made. Yes, the Northern Ireland Protocol declares that Northern Ireland must always remain in the ECHR. It makes that declaration, and then it goes on to impose EU laws, which are actually different to the ECHR. And of course, as we all know, a cross-community consent was effectively set aside when the Northern Ireland Protocol, when the Northern Ireland Protocol was imposed on Northern Ireland, which is a breach of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. So the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, like so many international treaties, has been breached multiple times by those who wished to breach it, and where they were able to just actually force it down the unionists' throats. And I think it's about time that we did what's right for the United Kingdom. And if they don't like it, well, they're going to have to lump it, and we're going to have to hold our ground and say, no, this is what's right for the United Kingdom. This is what's right for Northern Ireland, and we're doing it. If you think it's a breach of the Good Friday Agreement or the Belfast Agreement, well, take us to some international court and we'll have it out in court. But we're doing what's right for the country. You can't have international treaties trumping what's right for the country. That will end under an advanced UK government.
Yeah, and I mean that's I'm sure that's music to every single unionist and loyalist person that's actually watching this program, because what we perceive is that the Conservative government and the DUP completely betrayed Northern Ireland, and obviously it started when the DUP actually held the balance of power in Westminster, because
Yeah,
they had those 6 MPs and it was such a tight margin, and the DUP got no leverage from that whatsoever. And
none.
so the DUP haven't done us any favors. Jim Allister has always taken a very strong stand on these things, and he's to be commended for it. But again, he is a voice crying in the wilderness, because he's one MP from one party that it would be totally different if there was if Advance was in government, and say Jim was in Advance, or other unionist politicians were in Advance, and were able to have that leverage. Now, obviously, it would cause absolute pandemonium amongst hardcore Sinn Féin Republican type people, but I think if when people of goodwill from all sides see that this is for the benefit of Northern Ireland, then hopefully we'll be able to win that argument on a non-sectarian
I think we
basis.
would win the argument overnight, Richard. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that sounds, perhaps to some people that sounds glib, overconfident and arrogant. But we see the damage that's being done by the ECHR and by EU human rights law right across Europe. And if we can remove it, as we would from Northern Ireland and Great Britain, that makes us a safe haven for British citizens, not a safe haven for illegal migrants. They will go elsewhere. And I think we will strengthen the union overnight. There would be very few calls from Catholics in Northern Ireland against what we would be doing, because it would be so obviously in their interests.
The other thing I was going to ask, leading on from that, is about economics. The questions are all over the place now, but leading on from that, economics, Ben. Obviously, Northern Ireland is a unique case because of the troubles, and we'll talk about legacy in a minute. Because of the troubles and because of the financial dependence on the UK, because a lot of heavy industry left. What could you? And again, I'm not asking you to make policy on the hoof, and nobody's going to hold you to this, because what we don't want is people clipping this and say, you promised this and such a time. But aspirationally, how could we make Northern Ireland the Singapore of Northwest Europe? What could we do in that respect?
Well, I think one of the reasons Northern Ireland's economy is challenged is because it hasn't had a significant political voice in Westminster. And so Westminster's turned its back on Northern Ireland, not just constitutionally by putting an Irish border in place, but economically, it hasn't really given a damn. And frankly, Stormont has let Northern Ireland down dramatically over the economy, because Stormont was granted the ability, I can't remember the year now, I think it was 2016, maybe before that, around 2016, was given the ability to set its own corporation tax rate, which would have meant that Northern Ireland could have set a corporation tax rate that was the same as the Republic, which is at 12.5%. Northern Ireland's was at the time 20%, it's now 25%, and the Republic's is set at 12.5%. If you operate as the island of Ireland does, as an open economy, and you have one part of it charging twice the tax rate as another part of it, all businesses are going to be attracted to the part that's got the lower tax rate. And we see that. The Republic of Ireland has a phenomenally large corporation tax rate. It's a small economy, and it has a corporation tax take that is about a third of the entire United Kingdom's. That's how much corporation tax it collects. And that's because it has a low rate. And Stormont should have used the right it had to reduce its corporation tax rate to match the Republic, to make it competitive. It didn't do it because of the Barnett formula. It feared it would lose government subsidies. But I put a detailed plan together, Richard, which I sent to the DUP when I was talking to the in times when I got on with Jeffrey Donaldson. We were friends, and I sent him a detailed plan on how you could cut the corporation tax rate for Northern Ireland without losing a penny of funding. And there is a way to do it, which I won't bore your viewers with, but there's a way to navigate from 25% corporation tax rate to 12.5% without doing any damage in terms of funding for Northern Ireland. And the DUP didn't bother following the plan.
That
And
is that is amazing. I didn't know any of that, Ben. I did. That's amazing, because that's a knowledge gap that I've obviously got there. So just thinking on my feet about this, obviously it's not only the fact that the DUP didn't do that, but what they're doing in not doing that is playing into Republicans' hands, because Republicans were saying, look at how strong the Republic of Ireland economy is and how weak the Northern Irish economy is. If we joined together with them, we'd all have this lovely 12% corporation tax. So we could have actually had that from 2016.
from the minute that there's an act of parliament giving Northern Ireland the right to set its own corporation tax rate, which Northern Ireland has not invoked. And it's to Northern Ireland's great disadvantage that it hasn't done it. And it needs to do it. It needs to get on and do it. And I mean, an advanced UK government would be looking to cut taxes right across the board. You don't. Let's just talk about tax for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tax is a penalty. It's a penalty on you doing something. If you want to stop people speeding, the way you do it is to penalize them by fining them, and people stop speeding, right? And tax is similar. So if you tax people when they make money, effectively what the government's doing is signaling to those people not to make money. That's literally what it is. They're being penalized because they made money. And so if you have a very high penalty rate, you're less likely to make money. The Labour government doesn't get this. They're about to raise taxes even more. They're going to penalize us more for making money, which means we're going to make less money, which means they're going to get less of a tax take. And we're well past the point where raising taxes is going to raise more revenue for the government. We're well past it as an economy. Every increase in rate that this Labour government now imposes is going to reduce the amount of money they collect from the British people, because we're incapable of living within our means now. We can't do it. The people can't do it. We're overtaxed. We're overburdened. So raising taxes is a false way to grow the economy. We have to find a way to lower taxes as fast as possible. And just going back to Reform ditched last week all its tax cutting policies because it wants to curry favor with the mainstream media. It doesn't want the mainstream media to be able to attack it and say you've got unfunded tax cuts that you wish to make. And that shows again how weak Reform is. They should have stood their ground. They should have made the case, as it is the case, that we need to lower taxes if we want to grow the economy. And so an advanced UK government coming in will do that for Northern Ireland. The other thing that we'll do for Northern Ireland, which again hasn't taken place for years, is investment in infrastructure in Northern Ireland. It is a government's job to make sure that a country can communicate within the country, that you have rail lines that work, roads that work, Wi-Fi, 5G everywhere. These are critical components of what a government should be aiming to do for its people. And as I've said many times, I don't know if you heard me say it, Richard, but the time it takes for a train to get from Londonderry to Belfast today is the same as it was in Victorian times. There's been no increase. It's 80 miles, and I think it takes 2 hours, 20 minutes. It's an absolute blooming joke. 80 miles and 2 hours, 20 minutes, something like that. Fact check me again, I'm going by my memory. But those are broadly, I think, the numbers. And that is testimony to how Northern Ireland has been overlooked. If we want the Northern Irish economy to perform, we have to invest in it, and we've got to give it the tools by which it can perform. And a Reform government would do that.
And would you consider things like
an advanced government would do that? Sorry,
yeah, I always do that, Ben. Do you know what? It's a Freudian slip, and I always do that as well.
Yeah, it's not good from the leader of advance.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not good from any of us. I've done that. No, you're forgiven because I've done it loads. So
I was deputy leader of
that's
Reform.
One of the problems. That's one of the problems of going out live. But look, I've said it loads of times as well. I had to Paul Thorpe's done it. We all do it when we're talking about advice. but no, so just one more on the economy. What about a free port, Ben? There's some sort of cack-handed fudge on some sort of investment zone for Northern Ireland, where if you buy loads of solar panels, all that sort of nonsense. What about the idea of a free port for Northern Ireland again?
Well, I
Because we're
think
told that it's not possible because of the Good Friday Agreement and the protocol and all sorts of stuff. What's your take on a
Yeah.
free port?
So I think it's the protocol that prohibits a free port, because we're required under the Northern Ireland Protocol to make sure that Northern Ireland abides by EU state aid law. And a free port effectively is giving Northern Ireland a break at the overall exchequer's expense in the UK. So that would be state aid through the back door, as it were. But under an advanced UK government, I don't think you need Northern Ireland to be a free port, because all of the United Kingdom is going to be governed under the same principles of lower regulation, lower taxation, giving people the ability to do what they need to do in order to make money, and keep that money when they've made it. Very basic principles that will galvanize people into action. So I think that the whole need for Freeport. So Freeport is a sticking plaster on an economy that's not working. You're trying to find a mechanism to give it a boost. But what we need to do is find a solution for the entire United Kingdom.
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, I think that's, you want to make the whole of the United Kingdom as Singapore, not just Northern
Absolutely.
Ireland.
Yeah.
The other thing is, there's a lot of, you won't see it in the media in the mainland, but there's a lot of lobbying on the BBC and on various different UTV, various different TV stations, and the chattering classes in the Belfast Telegraph in Northern Ireland. Everybody talking about a border poll. Everybody wants a border poll, except nobody really wants a border poll. But obviously, the Republicans and the chattering classes do. What's your opinion on that? Because, and again, I'm sure you're aware of this, once a border poll has taken place, once every 7 years they can ask for another border poll. So it's constantly destabilizing Northern Ireland. I'll be honest with you, not that I'm afraid of a border poll, but I just think the stress and the sectarian nonsense it'll stir up will be a disaster. What would Advance do about this clamoring for a border poll among nationalist Republicans and the chattering classes?
Well, I mean, it is an absurdity in my mind that you could have a country which is subject to break up every 7 years, potentially subject to break up every 7 years. Um, and we will look at that carefully, that provision. But I think if we take the steps that I've just described, there won't be a call for a border poll, because we would have sorted out the demographic impacts of what's going on elsewhere in Europe. We would have put in place the mechanisms by which Northern Ireland can become a vibrant economy in its own right, cease to have to rely on the Barnett formula in order to get its funding. Um, what we need to do is energize the entire United Kingdom. And I think an advanced government would do it.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree on that. Um, Obviously, touching on that, I'm not sure. I don't think I've asked this. Would you, if necessary, renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement where it needs to be renegotiated? Have we touched on that? I'm not
Why
sure.
would I? So you did ask, you touched
Oh,
on it. I
yeah,
mean, my view is we do what's right for the United Kingdom. And if the Republic have got a problem with it because they think it breaches the treaty, well,
yeah,
then they need to make an application in some international court or come and have a chat. But we're going to do what's right. And if they don't like it, well, come and complain,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair enough. The other one is legacy issues. We've had Soldier F dragged through the courts. Now, again, you've got to handle this sensitively. We're very sensitive to all survivors and victims of the Troubles, and many of us were touched by the Troubles in various different ways. What would Advance UK do about legacy issues? Obviously, I'm very concerned about the protection of veterans, but we've got to consider the whole community as well. So what would Advance UK, and again, we're not holding you to any of this, Ben. I'm just asking you, general questions that we can obviously hone and refine, later on. But it's a big issue among veterans at the minute. What would you do about that?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but I think the total number of people killed during the Troubles by British armed forces or security services came to about 500 people.
Yeah,
Is that about
around
right?
that. Yeah, that wouldn't be
Yeah.
too far away.
And I think that the IRA killed over 2,000 people,
Yes.
and the loyalist, paramilitary killed about 1,000. Have I got the numbers broadly
Yeah,
right?
and the other thing is the vast majority of Catholics that were killed by the IRA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, and most of the 500 that were killed by British soldiers or, our security services, there's no dispute over them. So it's a very small number of people about which we're talking. Nothing, no crime should be condoned. But I think when you don a uniform and you do what you believe to be right, and the pressure is high because you're in a combat situation, you're not actually taking it upon yourself to initiate violence. You're a reaction to the violence which has been initiated by others. Then I think there has to be quite a high degree of tolerance by the state as to the actions that you take. And I think one of the issues that's happened, not just in Northern Ireland, by the way, but across the United Kingdom, is this preparedness to throw our own soldiers under a bus. We saw that with action in Afghanistan. We saw that with action in Iraq, soldiers being hauled through the courts. I mean, why would anyone join the army and protect the country if they thought that every time they did their job, there was a risk that have to go and answer for it in a court? I can tell you the combatants against whom we have to fight are not drawn, they're not dragged through any courts. And so there has to be a reversal of this approach of dragging our soldiers through the court, whereas we've effectively given a blanket amnesty to all terrorism in Northern Ireland.
totally. And I mean, obviously, we're coming up to Remembrance Day. I think unless you've been in those situations, and I've been in these situations where it's a very fine margin between pulling the trigger and not pulling. Thankfully, myself and my colleagues I was with didn't pull the trigger on the occasions we were in those situations, but it's literally a split-second decision. If you're out in a rural environment and you hear gunshots and you go bursting through a hedge line like we did, and there's a guy standing there with a weapon in his hands,
Yeah, you've got to make a snap decision.
You've got a snap decision. Now, we realized thankfully that it was a shotgun and he was a guy just out shooting rabbits. But
yeah, crikey.
That's I would have been if I'd have pulled the trigger, I'd be one of the guys on a legacy. So that's why it's very personal to all veterans. And I think again, knowing that the government's got our back, and again knowing that local MPs, if they were advanced MPs, would be rock solid on that, I think is and again, it's not in any way insulting the people, the families of the people that were killed on Bloody Sunday or any of these other cases. It's literally the fact that we know how difficult those split-second decisions are to
and
make.
I think the state, and just we've got to reacquaint ourselves with the fact that we've recruited these young men to come and risk their lives for the country, and if we return their consent to do that by dragging them across the coals every time they've done it to the best of their ability, we will cease to be able to recruit anyone. The army itself people won't want to join, and it's a dangerous job that we're asking them to do. And I think if they come to stand by us, we must stand by them. There's a contract, isn't there? This is the other thing. We often we talk about the need to protect the country. We send our troops into harm's way, and we send them into harm's way often ill-equipped, and increasingly with less training, less know-how, because the army is not being invested in. And this is a breach of the social contract between the state and our armed forces. And we've got to reinstill that contract. If you stand for us, we stand for you, of course. And our veterans, look at the way our veterans are. It's all part of the same problem, isn't it? The state isn't looking after after military personnel.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally, I think we've been governed by traitors for far too long, Ben, and we need some genuine patriots in power. And I think Advance is the only party that's gonna do that. And again, on the soldiering thing, if a soldier is not sure whether, if he makes a mistake, and anybody can make a mistake. If somebody's a psychopath and they go out there to murder someone, well, they'll go through due process and they'll come before the courts and they'll be prosecuted for murder. But if it's a soldier that's made a genuine mistake, the danger is with that. If our soldiers are out in somewhere like Afghanistan, or if there's another Islamist insurrection that we get involved in, and they hesitate, like you said, our enemies won't hesitate, and it will actually,
and they'll be dead.
They'll be killed.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that Advance would have the veterans' backs, because the Tory party didn't have the veterans' backs, and the Labour Party certainly doesn't have the veterans' backs. And again, would reform be any different to those other people? I'm not sure that they would. Not sure that they would at all. On numbers, Advance UK, as far as I know, they've got hundreds of members. What's the situation on membership in Northern Ireland as we speak, Ben?
I should have checked before coming on, but last time I checked, which was a few weeks ago, we had just under 600 members in Northern Ireland and just under 700 members and supporters. So there are another 100 people roughly who um, wish to support but didn't join as members. And I think that's fantastic going, given that we haven't even applied for electoral registration yet in Northern Ireland, which is
I
coming,
think
by the way. We just got
it's
to get our GB registration
oh,
done
that's
first.
actually happening. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely incredible, Ben. And again, like you say, that's literally just me and a few other people doing videos saying, "Hey, join Advance." They're
Yeah,
gonna they're gonna do, and obviously you doing you more so you doing your bit that you did during the protocol. And I think I'm right in saying that you backed the legal case. You
I
backed it with
did.
your own money, didn't you? I think you.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the whole legal case cost about just over a couple of 100,000. And very generously, I think we had donations through the crowdfunding I did of about 90 odd thousand. And we had a couple of big donations, but I put in £80,000 of my own cash. Yeah.
Well, and again, I mean, if you're watching this and you're wondering about Ben's commitment to Northern Ireland, he's literally he put his money where his mouth is with the party, and he's put his money where his mouth is with backing that legal challenge. And what was the outcome of that legal challenge? Did anything positive come out of that legal challenge, Ben?
Yeah. So, I mean, what was really interesting about the end result of that legal challenge was broadly the ruling that came from the Supreme Court was that, yes, we agree the Northern Ireland Protocol has broken the Acts of Union. Yes, we agree with you. It has broken it. And you would have thought at that point, Richard, they should say the Northern Ireland Protocol's got to go,
Yeah,
right? This is the
yeah,
Supreme Court of the United Kingdom.
yeah.
But they said it's been legally broken. The Acts of Union have been legally broken. The Withdrawal Agreement Act, which is the Act of Parliament that was passed in order to give effect to the Northern Ireland Protocol, the Withdrawal Agreement Act is supersedes the Acts of Union. So Parliament literally passed a law to break the United Kingdom.
And
And
this was the Conservative and Unionist Party under Boris Johnson
absolutely. And I wrote to Boris Johnson.
Lord Frost.
Can I
This,
just say something
yeah,
else that may be a bit esoteric, but it's very interesting. At least to me, it was very interesting. Um, when we challenged the government over the Northern Ireland Protocol, I wrote to Boris Johnson and I said, "Dear Mr. Johnson," or "Dear Prime Minister," I can't remember what I used. If you don't concede this, if you concede this case, if you don't fight this case, if you concede this case, you would have lost in a court of law the argument, and the Northern Ireland Protocol, as far as the United Kingdom is concerned, would be rendered null and void ab initio, as if it never came into place in the first place. And under international law, under the Vienna Convention, I think it's Article 46. Again, you'll have to fact check me. I'm going by memory now. It's 2 or 3 years ago. Um, Under Article 46, if a British court had found the Northern Ireland Protocol to be illegal, which would have been the case if the government had conceded the case to us, then the international treaty could be legally denounced by the United Kingdom without any consequence. So I said, if you concede this case, Prime Minister, the Union will be secured. He had an opportunity to secure the Union by not fighting the case. He fought the case, won the case. The Irish Sea border stays in place, and we have a Supreme Court telling us the Acts of Union have been broken. That's the course that they chose, even though there was a clear legal route to reuniting the United Kingdom. Does it make sense what I said?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So basically, Boris Johnson refused to do something that would have saved the union,
He refused to do something that would have
and
saved the Union.
and decided
And
to
I
actually
know
take
Jeffrey, and I know
unionist
Jeffrey
court.
Donaldson. Sorry,
Yeah,
I just want to
yeah,
finish. So I
yeah.
asked Jeffrey Donaldson texted me one day and he said, "I'm going to see the Prime Minister." I said, "Look, I've written this letter. Jeffrey, please make the case to Boris." He just needs to step aside. Let us win. He's such a good orator. He'd make some. He'd be able to campaign his way out of the fact that he lost the case, but lose the case and get rid of the protocol, and then go to the EU and say, "I'm really sorry. I did agree with you, but actually, a UK Supreme Court ruling now says it's illegal. So we're done." You
So
know,
why on earth would he do that, Ben?
because he
Why?
didn't want to lose the case. He didn't want to be seen to be losing the case.
Do you think it
So
was just pride, or do you think it was there was a more sinister?
they just don't want the government to be seen to be losing to a challenge. But what a pathetic position to take when
Yeah.
actually losing would have been victory. Losing that case would have been victory for the government.
And I think this is the problem that we've got, that we have people in power, civil servants, politicians who genuinely are more interested in the international community than they are in their own country, and preserving and
Absolutely.
saving their own country. Getting back to these 700 members, 600 members, whatever it is, and again, there's people joining all the time. I mean, because I'm talking to people. When can they start organising in Northern Ireland? Branches, what can they do? Because there's people chomping at the bit. People talked to me last night. When can we start giving leaflets out? We want to leaflet our areas, but we want to know that we're not, treading on
Yeah.
anybody's toes. When can they start actually being proper activists and going out? And obviously, a lot of them want to do stuff on social media. What can people in Northern Ireland do now?
The regional network is being set up. We've identified um, there are going to be 12 regions for our regional network. Northern Ireland will be one region, Wales one region, Scotland one region, southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest, and so on, Midlands, West Midlands, and so on. And um, uh, so there will be a regional head appointed in Northern Ireland to head up the campaigning efforts in Northern Ireland. But you can start straight away. I see a question on the screen saying, could we have more merchandise? We do have a portal where people can go now and they can get merchandise, they can get leaflets, they can get caps. We're going to have flags very soon, advanced UK flags. And we're selling all of this at cost. We're actually not stepping in the middle. The supplier of these things has made his supply available on the portal, and you just buy it, and then you can go and distribute it. And if you need help financing it, please contact the party, and we'll help you finance the purchase of this stuff if you need it. But please start canvassing. Please start getting new members. We need new members. We need every member that believes in Advance UK to get more members into it. Family, friends, colleagues. The question is, can we have more merchandise? Literally yesterday, I sanctioned more merchandise to go on the portals. So clearly, someone is already buying it in Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
and we get cleared out of merchandise just as fast as we put it on the portal. It goes. So people are active.
The next question from, and by the way, guys, if you probably the easiest way to do questions, if you try and do them through the super chats, because there's loads of comments, so it's going to be easier if I can just see things coming through. But the next question is, I would love Ben as First Minister of Northern Ireland. Now, that's a great statement, but I guess that brings us on to, when will Advance be standing candidates? Will they stand them in the assembly election, or are we going to wait until the general election? And I'm not, again, we're not holding you to this. What's your sort of aspiration of when you want to stand people?
So the overall approach to electioneering by the party is going to be focusing on the general election. We're a new party, and the general election is the main show, if you like. But we are, as I've said to everyone to whom I've spoken, we will look at every election independently. We will assess our chances of winning it. If it looks winnable, if we have a councillor, for example, that's joined Advance because they were independent, they're now joined, or they were with another party and they've joined us. I suspect a lot of Reform councillors are going to be joining Advance once we get our electoral registration, and they will want to defend their seats. Then, of course, we will support them and we will fight those seats. But our approach to local elections is going to be quite opportunistic as opposed to policy driven. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We'll
Yeah.
fight elections where we think it makes sense to fight an election. But the aim is to get the candidates for the general election so we can have the best fight for the national election.
Yeah, what I'm going to do now, Ben, if you don't mind, I'm going to fire questions at you. I haven't vetted these questions, so they're just random ones from people in the chat. Okay, so the first one is let not and not let the fact we have an actual issue with the board with our border be missed. So obviously, I guess he's talking about the common travel area, and I suppose once we've left the ECHR, we've done whatever we need to do to secure the borders of the UK. That does create a bit of an issue on the border in Northern Ireland for obvious historical reasons. Have you any thoughts on that, on how we can have a border that's not a hard border, but it's going to stop migrants flooding into Northern Ireland? That I think that
Well,
is a
I think,
genuinely very serious, and good question, actually.
yeah, but I think the migrants are going to be flooding the other way because there'll be no ECHR in Northern Ireland. There'll be no EU protection for them in Northern Ireland. They'll be subject to arrest by British constabulary, detainment, and deportation because we'll have the ability to do it. I think what we're going to see is, to the extent that we've got an illegal migrant problem at the moment, they're all going to flood to the Republic through the common travel area. It may be the Republic that wishes to put up a border to try and prevent that from happening. Uh, and I think actually the other impact, it may take a while, the other impact of this of an advanced UK government will be the Republic crying out for the ECHR to be removed from the Republic. And then
Yeah.
they're going to have a scrap with the EU. And it may
That,
be that the Republic will apply to the United Kingdom to join our customs union.
well, that's yeah. Well, I mean, this is actually a very interesting question, Ben, because it does bring me on to something that somebody said to me the other day, and they said, and it was someone from the Republic of Ireland said this: "Can we have Advance Ireland?" So, well, I know that's a crazy thing to say, but why not? I mean, so that's
Yeah.
something that just I'm
But
going to
I
leave
think
that
the
one with you,
border
Ben.
issue, the common travel area has worked, if you like, perhaps worked against the United Kingdom so far. The common travel area is now going to work against the EU and against the Republic if they don't follow Advance UK.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think, like you say, if I think there's going to be a massive change in the Republic of Ireland. I think people are going to and hopefully it not be too late for them, but people are going to see that they are being absolutely overwhelmed by the migration issue, and all the main parties are not doing anything about it. And sooner or later, it is going to have a massive effect. I think what's happened in GB and particularly in England, as it's affected the middle classes, as you've got little, as Elon Musk call them, the hobbits in the Shire are now seeing that the orcs are living in the same villages. I think that's what's affecting public opinion in the UK, and I
Well,
think,
we've seen nationalists and unionists jointly campaigning. A first time in history, I think, isn't it?
yeah,
Unless
we've
I'm
we've yeah
mistaken.
we've done
Yeah.
that. We've done that for. I mean, again, and it's of course everybody's just far right, swivel-eyed lunatics according to the commentariat. But the reality is we've been doing this certainly for a year consistently, where we've been standing
Yeah.
together with a Union Jack and an
Isn't that
Irish.
great?
It's
Isn't that
amazing,
great? And
and
do you know
and
what
that's
that? Yeah, sorry, go on. Sorry.
no. What I was going to say was, Ben,
Yeah.
that's an opportunity for Advance. So I'm only half joking when I'm talking about Advance
No.
Island. It is an opportunity to find a way of bringing people together. And again, it means a lot of mindsets have to be broken down, and we have to give up some of our mindsets, and Republicans and nationalists have to give up some of their mindsets. But I think there is a potential for all right-thinking people on this island to come together to fight against the common problems that we're facing, which are economic, demographic, and all the other things that have come because of the globalists. So, sorry, Ben, go on.
Well, I mean, I agree with all of that. And I think that Sinn Féin, for example, who cozied up to Gaddafi, who cozied up to the Palestinian cause because they had commonality in the purpose of attacking the United Kingdom, when they see the benefit to the United Kingdom and in particular Northern Ireland from leaving the ECHR, getting rid of the EU human rights laws, etc., and they see their country is being undermined, but our country isn't, their nationalism, their sense of the Republic of Ireland as a nationalist unit, as opposed to their nationalism in Northern Ireland, but their sense of identity as a country will be further solidified, and they will be taking the fight to the EU. What we do, this is what should have been done in 2016. We should have charted a path which was for the benefit of the United Kingdom, and we should have shown the world that this is the right path and look how well we're doing. We didn't do it. And if we do that under an advanced UK government, which is the aim, the Republic will follow suit. You might even find Sinn Féin starts to like advanced UK and what we're up
I'm
to.
slightly more skeptical. Having known Sinn Féin for well over 40 years, I'm slightly skeptical. Well, not 40 years, 30, 35 years. I'm
But
slightly
their
skeptical.
base is going to like what we're doing. Their base is going to look at what Advance is doing and
The
say,
base will.
"Damn, yeah."
That's
Their base will say, "We want what Advance is doing."
I think the Irish working class are already noticing what's going on, and they don't. The reality is, Ben, they don't have a political voice, and this is where, again, something like Advance organising in the Republic of Ireland, that that was that's aware that you're actually better being with the, tying yourself lightly to the United Kingdom than being swamped by
Yeah,
the EU and the international. I think the thing is with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are very much like the Labour Party. They are an internationalist, communist outfit that support, the Palestinian, every cause that's against,
yeah,
against anything that's good. They'll hitch themselves to. But in terms of actual Irish patriots, I think there's a lot of Irish nationalists who believe in the sovereignty of the Republic of Ireland, who will be absolutely horrified by what's happening. They just don't have a powerful enough voice. There are crazy far right people in the south of Ireland, but nobody's really ever going to vote for them. So what they need is something, because I think what Advance has got, Ben, if I might say this, is Advance is a very, very moderate party. It's not an extremist party. It'll be painted as an extremist party by the commentariat, but it's a very, very moderate party with very moderate people in it. But that moderation
absolutely.
is just it's moderate patriotism, I think, is what we've got.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things I say to people is that I would any extremism for me means being prepared to use violence to get your political end. Okay, extremism doesn't work because when you become violent to try and achieve your political end, you defeat your ability to get to that end. You will not be the same people once you come out of that period of violence. You will be a different people. We won't be the phenomenally brilliant British nation that we used to be if we use violence to try to get back to that. We have to do it peaceably through argument, through debate, through winning hearts and minds, through the ballot box. That's the only way to do it.
No, I absolutely agree with that, and that's very much the ethos of what we've been doing in GB with the Unite the Kingdom rallies. It's exactly the same ethos that we're trying to, engender over here, because we've got street demonstrations, all sorts of stuff going on, and everybody is saying we are not going to go down the road of violence, because we've seen it in Northern Ireland. I mean, I was in the
Yeah,
military. There's people that will be involved on both sides that will have been involved in the conflict somewhere along the line that are standing up, because obviously patriotic people are the ones that can get sucked into these things when they happen. And I think that's something that we've really got to drill home time and time again, that everything we do has to be totally peaceful, totally democratic,
totally.
totally, I was going to say totally within the law. The law's changed that much that you can't even say that Keir Starmer's
Yeah.
pretty soon that'll be a criminal offence. But
Well, I'm waiting for the police to knock on my
that's it.
door.
That's that'd be a big story, Ben. Give us the scoop on that one if you get anything on. No, but in seriousness, I think you're absolutely right. Advance is a moderate party. What the Republic of Ireland needs is a moderate nationalist party that is genuinely patriotic and is willing to compromise and not be as belligerent as parties like Sinn Féin have been historically. We've got 5 minutes before the hour's up, Ben. So if you want to give your pitch to Protestants and Catholics, we've got to say that because there still is a divided community in Northern Ireland. Protestant and Catholics, why they should join Advance, why they should vote for Advance, and what you're going to do for them as leader of Advance UK.
Well, if the Northern Irish people wish to be prosperous, if they wish their nation, the nation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, to be preserved, if they see value in that national identity, and if they wish to be prosperous through that national identity, the only party to back is Advance UK, because the Conservative Unionist Party has proven through its actions that it doesn't care about that union or the prosperity of Northern Ireland. And we've discussed that on this programme. The Labour Party doesn't. Reform UK would leave the ECHR in place in Northern Ireland. It actually said so. Its mass deportation policy was to leave the ECHR in place in Northern Ireland, which would make Northern Ireland the repository of every illegal migrant in the United Kingdom. It
That's really
threw
important.
Northern Ireland under the bus.
That's mass. That point there, guys. If you get nothing else out of this, and if you don't get anything out of this interview, you haven't been listening. But if you don't get anything else out of this interview, that is a massive takeaway. If Reform get power, they've stated that they'll leave us in the ECHR. We will. I'm going to use another. We'll become the refuse bin for every illegal that's fleeing because they know they shouldn't be here, and that is going to destroy the
They will all leave Great Britain and go to Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
that's the effect of Farage's policy.
Ben, I interrupted you there.
No. So, I mean, so if you care about any of those things, and I fancy actually of the 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland, I would expect virtually all 1.8 million to agree with that. Wish it. Why would you wish anything else? It wouldn't make sense. Why are you living in Northern Ireland unless you in some way associate with the United Kingdom? And if you associate with the United Kingdom and you want Northern Ireland and therefore the United Kingdom and so on to be prosperous and safe and secure, then advance, I'm afraid, is the only option. There ain't no other option. It ain't Sinn Féin. It ain't any of the local parties because they don't get the traction in Westminster. And it ain't Reform. It ain't the Tories. It ain't Labour. It's us.
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, this is the problem. When I agree with everything you're saying, it's not a very confrontational interview. But I mean, everything you've said makes perfect sense. And I think all right-thinking people in Northern Ireland that are watching this will say, well, why not? So I'm gonna put a pitch out there. If you've watched this today, and if you've watched it back later, join Advance UK, because if we get in now and we build Advance UK, it's I think pretty soon it's gonna have hundreds of thousands of members across the United Kingdom. But that can only happen. What we've got all the tools in the box now to save the country. We've got the cultural movement with what's happening with the United Kingdom and what's happening with various different protest groups, which are great as long as they remain peaceful, and they will remain peaceful as long as we're involved in it. We've got Advance UK with what all the guys in Advance are doing. And again, I have no position in Advance UK. I'm just a lowly member, but I fully support these guys because I know everybody that's doing what they're doing in Advance UK, and I trust them implicitly. So anybody that's thinking, should I join a political party? Absolutely join Advance UK. And what is it? 20 quid a year or something, is it? Or
20 quid a year. Can I just say one last thing before I go, Richard? We are coming to Northern Ireland. We are coming to Northern Ireland. Please assume that. Any folks in Northern Ireland listening to this podcast, assume that. Get ready. Don't waste this time. Don't wait for us to come there and then start action. Let's get moving now. And if you want me to come to Northern Ireland, Richard, and do a rally, we'll do rallies across Northern Ireland. We'll do them now. I love coming to Northern Ireland, as you know. We'll do them right across Northern Ireland, and we'll bring the message directly to the people in Northern Ireland. I can't wait, frankly, to get cracking in Northern Ireland, and we are coming.
Well, let's do it. Let's talk about that offline, Ben. Let's get you over. Let's get some really good demonstrations going. And again, I've never been excited about Northern Ireland politics because I know the way it works, and it's sectarian. It's he said, she said. But what I think you've offered for the first time is something that I genuinely believe that people of all religions and none in this country who just want to see their home where they live as a prosperous place. I think it's the first time I've heard a unionist politician, which you are, saying something that everybody with a right mind could buy into. So thanks very much, Ben. And thanks for coming on. And let's make that a date. Let's get Ben across here. Okay, Ben. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.